Hi friends! This week, I'm going to go back to another old craft that I've done before. Almost 2 years ago, I did string art. Oh wow, I used the same color background too. In that video, I created string art from a couple of kits that I had, and honestly, I haven't thought about string art since that video. But then I saw this picture. I don't know why, but it actually never occurred to me that you could make your own kind of detailed designs. So the idea to try it has been nagging me ever since. Now, in my craft room, I've actually had this string art kit from Adult & Crafts sitting on my shelf for a while. The design that they show doesn't interest me at all, which is why it's been sitting here for so long. But it does have a lot of the supplies that I'll need. The kit came with this giant wooden board, but before I get to anything fun, I'm gonna have to come up with a plan. So first I measured the board. 12 inches by 12 inches. Not sure how that's gonna help me, but it's always good to be informed. I grabbed a piece of printer paper, and I think if I make the design as big as I can fit on the paper, I should be able to add some details to it. One of the few things that I remember from those kits is that in a couple of spots the nails were way too close together, and it made things kind of difficult. So hopefully making the design big can avoid that. I started by marking out the center of the paper so that I can try to center my design. I know you can fold the paper, but I didn't want to risk skewing the design if the paper didn't lay flat. Then I sketched out my idea. I wanted to go with an ice cream cone and add a cherry, whipped cream, chocolate syrup, and waffle cone stripes. I spent a lot of time measuring as I went, making sure that the sides were even and lines were straight. Then I planned out the nail placement, and this was the hardest part of the whole process. I know that any corners and intersections between two areas are going to need a nail. Then I tried to break the curves down into smaller straight lines, but not so small that it was cramped with nails. The lines on the waffle cone were the hardest part, and I honestly wish that I'd done them differently. I spread them out pretty far so there wasn't as many lines, but I was afraid that just one straight line of string wouldn't be as visible. So I made two lines pretty close together so that I could weave the string back and forth between them and make the waffle lines more impactful. However, that also meant 4 nails really close together at the intersections. I added nails inside each section to give me more anchor points for the string, thinking that I'm going to need the string going in a lot of different directions for good coverage. I did end up getting rid of these later because I realized it was just excessive. I added a shadow around the bottom of the ice cream since it was a pretty big area, but I really don't think I could get any more detailed than that. But I did get a little ambitious and added some sprinkles up at the top. Now, I'm going to transfer my design onto another piece of paper, because I'm going to use one piece of paper to actually hammer the nails through, so I definitely want to keep another one for reference. The first attempt barely transferred at all, so I added a harder surface underneath, and that seemed to work. Then I went over everything with a Sharpie to really darken it up. Am I stalling? I redrew my cone lines so that I could make sure to put the nails right at the point of the intersection, and my lines would be as straight as can be. Still stalling. I also counted my dots and my nails to make sure that I had enough. Listen, I was really worried about getting going and then finding out that there was something that I missed and the whole project getting derailed. The last step before I actually got to work on any of this was to plan out my thread colors. Finally, I can start doing something. I wanted to paint the board as a sort of background for the ice cream, and I'm going to speed through this part a bit because I wasted an entire day on it and about 99% of it was unnecessary. I gessoed the wood first so that it wouldn't soak up all of the paint, and then I went in with white and turquoise to make a sort of circular gradient that was darker on the outside. A vignette basically, but I don't really like trying to pronounce that word. And I just did this last week. I should be able to do this super easy, but no. I don't know if it's because the board is bigger or the paint is drying faster or if it's just my lack of skill. It's actually definitely just my lack of skill. But no matter what I did, I could not get this to blend. I tried layering, I tried mixing 6 different shades and blending in smaller areas. I even tried adding water to the paint to make a more translucent wash. Nothing was working. Finally, after like 6 hours and 10 layers of paint, I realized that most of this isn't even going to be seen anyway. So I was stressing about nothing. So I just painted the edges and moved on. Now let's get on to something that actually matters. Hammering in the nails. I centered the paper on the board and taped it down. Then I got to hammering. I worked from left to right since I was holding the nails with my right hand and I needed to be able to get my fat fingers in there. I used a clothespin where I could fit it to hold the nails so that I wouldn't accidentally hammer my own fingers. I hammered the nails about 1/4 of the way in because I wanted to make sure I had enough room on the nail for all of the thread that was going to wrap around it, but I did end up having to hammer them in a little bit further later on. On the cone, I paid really close attention to get the tip of the nail right on the intersections, so the lines were as precise as I could get them. And I did end up eliminating some of the nails inside the squares, just so I wouldn't run out, and it worked out just fine. Once all of the nails were in, I ripped the paper off. It didn't come off all in one sheet, which would have been super satisfying, and it did pull out one of the nails that wasn't in far enough, but eventually I got all the paper off. Then it was time to string this bad boy. I taped my reference up right in front of me because I definitely needed to refer to it. And I started with what, in my mind, were the bottommost layers of color, so that where the areas met, the correct color was on top. How do I explain this? Like, where the cone and the ice cream meet, the ice cream color should show on the border and not the cone color, because the ice cream is overlapping the cone. Does that make any sense? Probably not, and I don't even know if it would have mattered, but that was my logic. I tied off the string around whatever I chose as the first nail, wound around the outside of the section to give myself a guide, and then went back and forth filling in the area. I tried to use as many nail-to-nail connections for the string as I could so that all the different angles will fill in the space. Then, when I was done, I'd tie off the string. Then I pushed the whole section of string down so that there was room for more above it. Stringing the waffle lines was the worst part of the whole thing, because the nails were so insanely close together, and the lines didn't even end up straight despite all of my planning. They came out okay in the end, but that section was stressing me out. It was definitely a struggle to work in the tighter areas since the string would slip off the nail and unravel, or get snagged on another nail, so I spent a lot of time holding wraps down so they wouldn't come undone. I also realized that the string was so tight that it was pulling on the nails and they were leaning, so I ended up hammering quite a few of them in further as I worked. When I filled in the actual ice cream, I realized that there were plenty of nails around the outside, but I was able to angle the string with enough variations to get great coverage. So I probably could have eliminated some of the nails inside the cone. The larger areas like the cone, ice cream, and chocolate syrup took 2 bundles of thread in each color. I know they're called something else, but I'm not sure how to pronounce that word, so I'm not gonna. I do wish that I had longer nails with smaller heads on them, but honestly, for all I know, that would create more problems. Now, once this was all strung, it's looking pretty messy, so I'm gonna add an outline. I originally planned to only do the very outer edge, but I feel like it really benefited from outlining each section. It really brought it together. I also figured out how to make a thick border in a straight line by wrapping up one side of the nails, down the other, and making a figure 8 between them. Wish I had thought of that for the waffle lines and saved myself the struggles. By the time this was done, there is so much string on the nails. But since I'm a glutton for punishment, I added sprinkles over the syrup. And they look really cute, so I'm kind of glad I did. Finally, all of the stringing is done, and my fingertips are about to fall off. important question. Can you see where I messed up? Time's up. It's right here. This line was supposed to go straight up like the other side instead of out to the side. But I didn't notice this until the very end, and I made this mistake on literally the very first knot on the very first string. So I wasn't about to redo all of this. Looking up close, some of the nails are crooked and leaning, and some are pulling a bit on the wood, but from straight on and at any distance, it looks good. I'm really glad I spent an entire day working on that background. Speaking of the background, it's looking sort of plain, so I'm gonna do what I do a lot when something is plain, add sprinkles. I use Posca markers to draw them on, and I did go back and switch the blue to a different shade. Then I thought that maybe coloring the nail heads to match the string would look good, but I was wrong, so I wiped that right off. And finally, this is done, and I legitimately love it. I generally only will show a few people a project before I post a video, but I sent a picture of this to everyone I could think of. So despite all the struggles, looking at this just makes me so happy. I can't wait to hang it up in my classroom. That's all for this week. What do you think? Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.